Please welcome to the TEDxSonomaCounty stage, Mark Trautwein.
Thank you. I'd like a show of hands of KQED listeners who have heard at least occasional perspective. Oh, terrific. I'm talking to my demographic. Perspectives is unique. No other station, public or commercial, offers its listeners free time every day to express themselves on something that matters to them. I like to call it keeping the public in public radio. We air about 260 original pieces every year, which means in the 17 plus years that I've been the editor, we've aired more than 4,500 of these pieces. And I personally have read many tens of thousands of submissions. It's a 2-minute format, about 350 words, depending on your rate of speech. It requires discipline, savage economy, and an iron devotion to the point, which is the beating heart of the piece. Now, you and I have vastly different experiences of a perspective. For me, it's all about the front end, a submission, maybe an editorial process, getting the piece timed, recorded, and on air. But once it's aired, my experience of it is effectively over, but yours has just begun. So I'd like to talk about perspectives with a capital P, and then what I've learned over the years about perspective with a small p. Every perspective begins as a choice by a listener to write and submit a commentary to KQED. I don't take pieces from organizations or officials, and I don't solicit anything from anybody. This isn't about what the editor wants you to hear. It's about what our listeners want to say to each other. And I've also found over the years that by far the best pieces are always ones I never would have thought of. I never imagined the piece from a 9-year-old boy about his love of opera, or the 16-year-old girl who was slut-shamed by her classmates' parents. I certainly never imagined the father whose daughter jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. So when I'm asked, as I often am, what are you looking for, I usually say, a good idea or a story, well expressed. I have to say yes to a few, and thanks but no thanks to many more. What gets me to yes? My favorite pieces are ones that introduce me to an unfamiliar subject, or a familiar subject in an unfamiliar way. But it can be just a really strong piece of writing, a compelling story, an emotional connection, or an interesting observation about a timely subject, or an original voice. So now, of course, all those yeses and nos are informed by my own tastes. But a good editor breaks those bonds, steps into shoes not his own. Different people like different things. And I have to be alive to the piece that I disagree with, or whose subject matter I'm not particularly interested in. Otherwise, perspectives just becomes 2 more minutes of Mark Trautwein, and you really don't want that. Now, perspectives is criticized by some as not reflecting the diversity of the Bay Area. KQED has the largest public radio audience in the country, and the largest audience, sometimes, most of the time, of any radio station in the Bay Area. But it's seen by many, that its audience is seen by many to be too white, too liberal, too upper income, too well educated to really capture the community that we all live in. Now, I love pieces that don't check those boxes. I'm always looking for them. And on average, every year, about half of the authors you hear on Perspectives are new to us. But it's also true that Perspective struggles with diversity, just like all media does. Perspectives is self-selecting. So the voices you don't hear are the ones that don't speak up. Often because the basic premise of a perspective is alien to many people. You have to be comfortable with writing and ideas. You have to believe that someone else is actually interested in what you have to say, and that a radio station would put your ideas, your words, in your voice on the air. The vice of the virtue that I don't solicit is that the voices you hear are limited by what comes to me. So, what happens when I do get to yes? Some pieces are immaculate conceptions. My editing would only make them worse, and I love those pieces. Many more, however, are good pieces, but they need some editing, mostly to solve the two most common problems, length and the fact that most writers write for the eye and not the ear. And radio is a listening experience. It rewards shorter sentences, cleaner sentences, simpler sentences, and a conversational tone. My job is to protect the integrity of the author's idea, but just say it in fewer words. Then there are the diamonds in the rough. These are pieces that are really pretty bad, but buried deep down is the kernel of an interesting idea that could be grown into a decent perspective if the writer is willing to work with me. The bottom line with all this is that the writer can control everything up until the point that it goes in your ears. Then, quite frankly, anything can happen. And this is where perspective with a small p really begins. It's my perspective on perspective, forged by my 17 plus years as the Perspectives editor, is that everything is a Rorschach test. I deal in commentary, not ink blots, and facts do matter. But it's also a fact that what we see and don't see, how we respond to any particular thing, is less in that thing than it is in the sum total of the experiences of our lives through which we filter everything. That's not an especially original observation, but the implications of this seem to completely elude us. It means that no matter what my opinion is about anything, 40% of everybody else thinks I'm wrong or sees something completely different going on. It means that how I react to someone else's message says more about me than about the messenger. The message, in fact, is me. And the responsibility for what happens next is mine. I can insist on my point of view or my view, or I can open myself up to another. I'll give you an example of this. Last spring, a very talented writer named Lisa Thompson wrote a piece in response to the police shootings of African Americans. In it, she compared the response of many people to her very friendly black dog and to her friend's dog, which is white and not very friendly at all. Even when they were warned about the difference, many people shied away from her dog and tried to cozy up to the unfriendly white dog. Now, Lisa had said explicitly in the piece, because I had suggested strongly that she do it, people are not dogs. And then she went on to make her basic point, that beating heart point. Quote, "But whether we are talking about dogs or of unarmed young black men being shot in our streets, it is clear to me that sometimes we hear what we expect to hear, that we see what we expect to see." I thought it was a thoughtful, open-minded piece. Tons of our listeners did not. Some said it was race baiting. Others said it was racist. at least they could agree that I was an idiot and that KQED should be ashamed of itself. Now, my response to this was defensive. These people didn't know what they were talking about. They were missing her point completely. I defended my author. I even went online and posted a comment, which I rarely do, in which I said it's unfair to criticize an author for what she didn't say, especially when she's saying specifically, I'm not saying that. But the intensity of the response really unsettled me. I thought maybe I was missing the point. So I asked an African-American colleague, a woman that I very much respect for her candor, to listen to the piece. About halfway through, she said, I'm getting really uncomfortable now. And by the time it was over, she said, I hate it. To her, it did compare people to dogs. And the rest was a bunch of liberal hogwash. I managed then not to do what so many people do when they ask an African American for their opinion about something and then hear something they don't like. I didn't tell her she was wrong. I asked her questions about her experience, so different from mine, and the conclusions she had drawn from it, so different from mine. And I got an earful about what it's like to actually be compared to animals, repeatedly, systematically, maliciously. And the contempt that grows when people who pretend to be your friends and allies don't take the time to understand or listen to you. It was uncomfortable. It was disturbing, but I walked away from it a better man because I had finally done what I asked so many other people to do. I hadn't taken the bait for an argument, but the opportunity to learn something from somebody else. Lisa Thompson had said it herself in the close of her piece. Her words, but maybe if we learned to pay better attention to one another, to listen, maybe we would start to see things differently. Maybe we should start to recognize that our beliefs are not always our reality. Perspectives are ink blots, but they're not just ink blots. They're an opportunity for others to share their lives and their stories with us, and an invitation to the rest of us to make space, to make room for their truth. So, with a perspective, a very long perspective, I'm Mark Trautwein. Thanks for listening.